Please welcome Skift Senior Research Analyst, Seth Borko.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Such a pleasure to be here in person with you and online on the phones. My name is Seth Borko. I'm a research analyst with Skift. And today we're going to be talking about what else? The great merging. When the boss writes an essay about it, you got to present on it. So we're going to break it down. We're going to do some details on what we see as the merging happening in this space. We basically think, again, it's a great merging. So there's multiple facets to it, not just one. The most obvious is probably this last one that Rafat alluded to, the merging of hotels and homes and the product coming together. But we think it's just as important to focus on some of the other facets of the industry and of the consumer that are merging. Things like consumer personas, things like the trip planning process, how you get inspired, research, and plan your stay. And of course, yes, alternative accommodations and traditional accommodations. All right, let's jump into it. Our first merging is the merging of the consumer persona. At Skift, we often take a consumer lens. We start with a consumer and we work backwards, right? And we believe that work, life, and travel are blending together. I know that we planned this conference so that you could fly in, fly out, but actually what we see from the data is that, and hopefully many of you will spend the weekend, for instance. This is data from Trip Actions. They're a corporate travel company. And they've seen, it was already a trend before COVID, but they've seen a huge rise in people who are adding weekends onto their business trips as a result of flexibility that's coming around because of the pandemic. And it goes the opposite way too, right? People taking leisure trips, bringing their laptop with them, add in 2, 3, 4 days, doing a little bit of work, but being able to stay longer. So those are people who are kind of dipping their toes into the pool of the extra flexibility that comes with the remote world we live in. But there are some folks who are ready to dive in with both feet, right? And this is that digital nomad trend that we hear a lot about. It's very trendy, but this is search interest on Google for that term, digital nomad. The date access is a little bit off here, but let me assure you that this was updated as of just 1 week ago. This is data from May. And the important thing you'll notice is that even though digital nomad is a very trendy thing to come out of the pandemic, this chart looks a lot different than the Peloton chart, doesn't it, right? It hasn't come back down. People are still very interested in this trend of digital nomads. It's at an all-time high even as we speak. And so what we think the interesting that's coming around because of this merging of the consumer personas is these length of stay windows are converging. We maybe used to have this place where we would stay for a couple of nights, 1 or 2 nights, and we'd call that a hotel. And there was a place where we'd stay for 365 nights, and we called that an apartment. But we think increasingly there's this kind of meeting in the middle where those 2-night weekend getaways are becoming 5-night trips, and the 5-night trips are becoming 9-night trips. And on the other hand, you have people saying, maybe I don't want to sign a 12-month lease or an 18-month lease. Maybe I want a little more flexibility in how I work and I live and travel. And so you're coming to this mid-stay point. I think we're both kind of converging on that. And let's be clear, right? Companies have existed in this space before. It's not a new idea. This is a corporate house and this is extended stay hotels. They've existed, but we think what's happening is that because so many more consumers are able to kind of exist in this middle point, there's an opportunity for more traditional and more established brands to lean in and to build products in this space. In this space. And so what's happening is that it creates an opportunity for more memberships, for more subscriptions, for things like that. Because a membership doesn't offer a ton of value to someone who's only spending 1 or 2 nights on the road. But if all of a sudden you're seeing people spend more and more time, well then you can really kind of lean into this sort of membership thing. It offers a lot of value. You could pick any number of examples. I think we have Inspirato here today. It's a classic, great example of a subscription pure play. We have, I think, Citizen M just launched a subscription. I just chose for this slide, almost at random, I chose Soho House. Really cool company. They've been around forever. Well, not forever, but for what feels like a long time. They're building a great membership model with growing network of clubs and also a sense of community. But what you'll see is that because of the pandemic, they're at a record high membership levels. In fact, their wait list to become a member at Soho House is the highest it's ever been. There are 70,000 people right now who would tell in Soho House, please, 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 can I give you my money? And they're saying, no, sorry, we're full up right now. So it's really, there's a lot of interest growing in this market for subscriptions and memberships. And by the way, a paid membership is a subscription, really, but there's also such a thing as unpaid memberships, right? We shouldn't count out loyalty programs. These are membership programs. You want to get people into your ecosystem and lock them in as best as possible. If I commit to being a Bonvoy member or a Hilton Honors member, I'm just as much in a membership community and I make those decisions just as much based on kind of the supply of hotels and properties as if I signed up for a more traditional membership. Go forward one slide. So what's happening here is that we think that membership platforms, again, whether paid or unpaid, really transform the trip planning cycle. It takes the trip planning thing from being a transactional experience to being one that's very much driven by engagement. So in the old model, right, you would start with inspiration, you'd read a magazine, see an Instagram post, then you'd go online, you do your research, then you go to a booking site, you make the book, then you stay, then you never talk to those people ever again. Done. Transaction over. But as you build more of a membership model, well, all of a sudden these things start to converge. They start to happen all at the same time. I mean, for starters, you need to commit to the travel network before you even have your stay. So the commitment part comes first. And then also, when you're staying in a property, you're going to be talking to the other guests. Oh, you're a member of this club or this subscription as well? What else did you try? What other properties are available? What else is available for me to offer? Where can I go next? And so all of a sudden, the inspiration, the experience, the research, all of those different steps of the trip planning process are coming together. And what that means is that also traditional metrics for the hotel industry, something like a RevPAR, it's still important, don't get me wrong, but also maybe you need to start thinking a little more like a Netflix and think about things like churn, things like engagement, customer lifetime value, those sort of things. All right, and let's talk about our final merging, the one that we were very familiar with, the merging of lodging products. Alternative accommodations, they are absolutely, it's a misnomer at this point, no longer an alternative choice. This is recent reports that we put out from Skift RESEARCH, our market size estimates. We believe that in Europe, about a quarter of the market is now alternative accommodations. In the United States, it's about a fifth. So it's very much growing. So we should ask ourselves, what is the path forward for short-term rentals? It's one of the things we're going to be discussing at this conference. I would suggest that maybe we're going back to the future. The movie holds up, by the way. If you haven't seen it recently, check it out. And what I mean by that is that the hotel industry can serve as a roadmap for the short-term rental industry. We can look at many of the steps that took place in traditional accommodations and see them being mirrored in the short-term rental space. Moving from that local owner-operator model towards professional management companies, towards building brands. Of course, the rise of online booking sites, Airbnb, is the obvious one, but also the increased focus on direct bookings and on service standards that are growing, and we see that with companies like Sonder. Those are just examples, by the way. I don't think that the space for direct bookings in short-term rentals is full. There's a lot of room to grow there. And then as we push forward and we say, what are the other things that happen in the hotel industry, we can start to think about things like, what about institutional investors, public REITs? What about some of these major tech platforms? And I'm going to get some angry emails from some tech platforms saying, no, we exist, and I know you do, but I don't think there's anything quite at the same scale of, say, like Oracle Hospitality for the short-term rental industry yet. So that's white space for me that I think is a really interesting area of investment. As Rafa alluded to, JLL made a big announcement. Their institutional investors go into the short-term rental space. And the slide was locked before that news came out. But look, this isn't a two-way street. It's not just that short-term rentals are going to learn from the hotel industry. It's going to go the other way as well. Hotels need to learn from short-term rentals. They are a huge part of the market. Clearly, they offer something that consumers like. And I think, case in point, let's take a look at these three properties. One of them is not like the other. Can you spot which one stands out? It's this one, right? The Skamania Lodge in Washington State. They offer a treehouse-like stay, and you wouldn't be surprised if this was on Airbnb, but in fact, all three of these properties are owned by the same exact company, by Pebblebrook Hotel Trust, which, by the way, is a New York Stock Exchange-listed public REIT. This is not some small, scrappy operator. I mean, they're doing a good job, but they're not underdogs here. Clearly, what's happening is we're seeing major hotel investors say, we need to take design cues from the short-term rental space. We need to take experiential cues from the short-term rental space. We need to learn what's happening in those markets and incorporate them into our commercial portfolios in a very serious way. And finally, I want to talk about kind of the future of the industry, where we're going next. We're going to have that oral history of alternative accommodations. That's what I would call 1.0 and 2.0. I'm often thinking about alternative accommodations 3.0. The first iterations were very much in the short-term rental space, but as we know, short-term rentals are very mainstream now. I think the 3.0 is moving beyond short-term rentals, moving into more experiential ways of staying and living and traveling. Things like we got RVs, we've got campsites. I think we're going to have auto camp later in the session. These guys harvest hosts. You live and work on a vineyard. There's a lot of really interesting things here. Alternative accommodations, I think, has always been the laboratory of the lodging industry, so to speak. And so as one subsector emerges from the incubator, we're going to look and see what's coming up next. Yeah, so I will wrap it up here with this summation slide of what we really view as the great merging that's driving the future of lodging. It starts first and foremost with a consumer, right? Personas are merging. That was happening before the pandemic, but it's really being accelerated by the rise of remote work. I no longer have a business travel persona and a leisure travel persona. I just have my persona. That's leading people to want more flexibility in their time. They're spending more nights on the road, and as a result, memberships are a far more attractive value proposition than they were before. But the thing is that although companies are leaning into memberships, it leads to a second merging in the trip planning cycle. It means that you're breaking down the old traditional transactional path to purchase, and things like inspiration, research, experience, and bookings are all often happening simultaneously in property at the same time. And that means that the drivers of economics for these membership platforms look more like things like engagement, churn, lifetime value, and they stand alongside the traditional metrics like operating profit or RevPAR. And then finally, we're seeing the actual property merging, alternative accommodations going mainstream, and it's so important. I think we're all here today, kind of look to your left, look to your right. Who can you learn from? What best learns from these other subsectors can we take and incorporate into our business and break down those silos? So that's it for me. Again, thank you for having me. If you have any more interest in Skift Research, please contact us and enjoy the rest of the day. It's a pleasure.